Live from Anderson Hall on the campus of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, this is Beyond the Arc, live on KRNU2, streaming worldwide at krnu.unl.edu. Now, here's your host, Tommy Rezach, along with Reed Hunziker and Kellen Hevican.
Well, Reed and Kellen are out. No big deal, though. We are here not on our usual day. We are here on a Friday morning. Good Friday morning to you from Anderson Hall on UNL's City Campus in downtown Lincoln. I'm Tommy Rezach. This is Beyond the Arc on KRNU2, live at krnu.unl.edu. Joining us in studio now for the third consecutive show, pinch hitting for both Zach and Kellen again, is Zach Penrice. Zach, good morning to you. How are you?
Just fine this morning, Tommy. How are you doing this morning?
I am good. I got up pretty early to be ready for this. I was up kind of late last night, kind of getting ready for this show. Lots to talk about. A Husker-heavy show. Lots going on in Husker sports. Spring football starts Saturday. We're not going to hardly going to spend any time on it, really, because the spring game's not for over a month, and it is only spring, right? I mean, not much. I mean, there's a fair amount to talk about, but it's a little premature right now. So we're just going to get into that a little bit. Men's basketball in action Sunday, their regular season finale. We'll talk plenty on that coming up later this hour. Couple of guests on the show. Nebraska women's basketball fell absolute heartbreaker in Indianapolis in the Big Ten tournament last night, falling to Rutgers. David Stover is down in Indianapolis covering that for the Daily Nebraskan. Probably going to be heading back to Lincoln sometime soon. But he has been kind enough to agree to join us on the phone around 10:30 in about a half hour, and he'll recap what was, as I said, a very heartbreaking game. Nebraska did come back from a pretty big deficit, but ultimately lost by 3 points. We'll get to much more of that later, but a little bit of breaking news, Zach, before we dive into our opening headlines. Terrell Suggs arrested just this morning? Yeah, just
recently, I think in the last hour or so, he got arrested. Yeah, it shouldn't be that too big of a deal, though. I think it was pulled over for he got in some sort of vehicle accident up in Baltimore, I believe, and turned out he had a suspended license. So I think that there were no injuries in the accident when it was reported, but you can't be driving around with a suspended license, Tommy. So
yeah,
that's pretty much what he got, what he is arrested for at this time. But it shouldn't be too big of a deal, and I think that overall he should be fine.
Yeah, so nothing too major out of that story. Again, Terrell Suggs arrested for looks like a suspended license, but shouldn't be anything too major. Maybe a minor suspension. Who knows? But again, nothing. What's the word? Nothing too groundbreaking. Nothing too horrible, I guess. But yeah, you can't be, as you said, you can't be driving around with a suspended license. There was one more thing. Golden State won again last night, beat the Oklahoma City Thunder again. Third time this year, and Golden State has now set the NBA record for best record through 60 games, now 55-5. But I'm sure we'll talk about that and a few other things when we get into our opening segment. We talk about all the top headlines in sports. It's our opening headlines. Okay, so to start us off, spring training, that's underway in baseball. And again, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on that. I mean, just the first few games have gotten underway this week. But the question has to be asked here, Zach. A few things here. So, looking big picture, I mean, spring training doesn't mean a whole lot. It's kind of like the spring game. You get a little taste for the talent, taste for the players, taste for the new rosters.
Right. Yeah.
Get excited. So, looking big picture, the season starts pretty soon. Your winners out of each division, who you have in the World Series, and what trade excited you most this offseason?
Well, I'll start with the trade this offseason, Tommy, and I'm going to look at the team that did the best this offseason. I really like what the Arizona Diamondbacks did in this offseason. It's kind of a team that a lot of people are missing, but they already have the offense, which is led by Paul Goldschmidt, one of the best players in the MLB already, and they added a lot of very good players to their pitching staff. I mean, you're talking about Zach Greinke, who they got this offseason. That was a very good pickup for them. And along with that, they went and got Shelby Miller from the Atlanta Braves, but in order to do that, they had to give up a few good prospects. They gave up outfielder Ender Encarte, and then prospects Aaron Blair and Dansby Swanson, who we know Dansby Swanson, who was the number 1 overall pick in the MLB draft just, I believe, 2 years ago, so they had to give up him. But they want to win now. They're tired of losing in Arizona, so I don't blame them for the move. So overall, I think it was a pretty good move for them. A few other notable moves that happened this offseason. I really the New York Yankees went and got a flamethrower closer, Aroldis Chapman from the Cincinnati Reds.
That was awesome.
Yeah, it was a very good pickup for them, but unfortunately he just got the 30-day suspension for I believe it was domestic abuse or something along those lines, and so he'll have to sit out the first 30 games of the season. And along with that, sticking with the Cincinnati Reds and clearing house, the White Sox picked up their star third baseman Todd Frazier, who knocked out quite a few home runs last year. I think was the Reds' best player. Won the home run derby last year, so I mean, it's a very good pickup for them right there. But those are just some of the many moves that were made in the MLB this offseason. Now, moving towards what you want me to do to these picks that you want for divisions. Oh man, this is gonna be tough. I'll start with the National League here. We'll start in the National League East. I gotta say that I like the Washington Nationals in that division. It's the safe pick. I think that the New York Mets and the Washington Nationals are going to be competing for that season or for that division all year long. The Mets came out of nowhere and won it, but the Nationals this year, I really like them. Even though they've never really won anything big, they seem like they almost choke every single year. But I really like them. In the National League Central, I like the Cardinals to win it. I know a lot of people are very high on the Cubs this year and all the new things that they have going on. And that the hype has never been higher, and the expectations are extremely high in Chicago this year. But they're still the Cubs. They still have never won. Yeah, it's been a very long time since they've won. So I like the Cardinals, who have been running that division for seems like forever. So I really like the Cardinals to win that division. In the National League West, I'm going to take the Arizona Diamondbacks to come out of nowhere and shock everybody. The team that has been bottom feeding in that division for years. I really like the Diamondbacks to win that division. And in National League wild cards, I'm gonna go with the Chicago Cubs and San Francisco Giants to be your National League wild cards. And I like the Giants because it's an even year. They seem in the last few years they win the World Series in every even year in the past 5 or 6 years. It seems like it's been so. I think that they're going to be dangerous this year, and they'll have a very good season for them. They just got Johnny Cueto in the offseason, so that's a very good pickup for them. So. Huge. That'll be a dangerous team. Now moving to the American League, starting in the American League East. I think this is the most wide open division this entire year in baseball.
That's a good argument.
I think that it's a very tough pick, but I'm going to go with the Toronto Blue Jays to win that one again. So I think that's another safe pick. I like the Blue Jays and everything that they're doing. Jose Bautista leading that offense it's in Troy Tulowitzki in his first full year up with the Blue Jays. That's going to be a very good team up there. In the American League Central, I think it's the easiest pick to make. The Kansas City Royals, defending world champs. Yeah, I really like what
hard to pick against.
Very, very hard to pick against them this year. I really like what they're going to provide this year. And then in the American League West, I'm going to go with the Los Angeles Angels to win that division this year, led by Mike Trout. I think that I'm making a few bold picks here. I do like what they're doing. I think the Houston Astros are going to have a little bit of a downfall of a year. I think that they're still young, okay? And what they did last year, it was a few years too early, what everyone said. I think they're going to fall back a little bit into reality this year. I think that the Astros are 2-3 years away from dominating that division, but I think that I think the Angels are going to win it this year. And my American League wild cards, I'm going to go with the Seattle Mariners and the New York Yankees. I believe will be the American League wild cards. I like the Mariners and what they've been doing down there. It's been a few years. They got Robinson Cano a few years ago, and just that they've been adding the pieces together. And I think that all comes together this year for the first time in a long time. They will make the playoffs, and I think that I'll make a lot of people up in Seattle very happy because it's been a while. It's been a long time coming since they've been in there. And then you wanted me to make a World Series pick, so oh man. Looking at these teams, I think the Nationals. I think they choke in the first round again. I don't like what they're doing. So I'm gonna go with the World Series as the San Francisco Giants versus the Kansas City Royals Part 2.
Oh man, okay.
I think that'll happen again. So I'm gonna take the Giants. I'm going to take the San Francisco Giants to win it again over the Royals. I think the Royals make their third consecutive World Series. And I think that the Giants will knock them off, and it'll be just kind of one of those surprising years again. I mean, it seems like we see it every year. The team that comes out of nowhere does very well. Last year, the Mets came out of nowhere, made a run all the way to the World Series, and so it's seems like it happens every year, Tommy. So I thought, and this year I'm going to take the San Francisco Giants just because it's been the trend the last 5-6 years for them. So I think it's a pretty bold pick, but also kind of a safe pick at the same time. So that's pretty much what I have to provide for Major League Baseball this year.
Wow, that's very in-depth, very bold stuff there from Zach Penrice.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Due to time constraints, I wasn't planning on going as in-depth, but out of the AL East, I'm going to take the Yankees. Getting Castor from the Cubs was big. Getting Chapman was probably one of the bigger moves of the offseason, but, I mean, he's going to miss 30 games, and you're right. It was a 30-game suspension under the MLB's domestic violence policy, penalty stemming from an incident with his girlfriend last October. Unfortunate, but, I mean, he has to pay the price, and I think that seems fair. I mean, he will lose 30 days of pay. He's going to lose $1.8 million of his over $11 million salary, and that'll allow him to reach 6 years of service time after this year, enough to become eligible for free agency.
Right.
But, getting, what was I going with this? Getting Starlin Castor from the Cubs was huge. He went 2 of 3 for a double, scored a run and an RBI, and the Yankees had their spring training opener against the Tigers. Pretty interesting game. I didn't watch it, went back and looked at kind of just what happened. 10-9 win for the Yankees, and Castor looked good. I think it was A-Rod hit a 2-run homer yesterday, so things are really coming together. Brett Gardner was getting in the swing of things. Looked like a pretty solid lineup the Yankees had this year with Gardner coming back and Headley, all those guys. I think the Yankees, they were close last year. They were never favored to beat the Astros in that wild card game last year. So unfortunate. I think I'll take the Yankees out of the AL East, kind of my bold pick. AL Central, there's no question it's going to be the Royals. AL West, I'm taking the Astros. I think they were really close last year. I mean, you remember that series with the Royals? They
had that one. It was over.
Yeah, it looked like they were going to
up by 5 in the 8th inning, and then they just completely blew the game.
Yeah, and then the Royals happened. Yeah,
yep.
So yeah. I think the Astros, it is their time. I mean, a lot of people say they're young, and they are, but I think in that division, I think the Mariners maybe it's not quite their time yet. I think Mariners make a push towards that wild card spot, but I don't think the Mariners, it's not their time yet. I will say the Astros win it, and I think one of the two wild cards is going to be the Rangers or the Angels. I think the AL West is going to be the most wide open division. One of them.
Rangers, wow. All right.
Yeah, NL Central, I think, is going to be pretty tight, but obviously. the NL East, I'm going to take the Mets. I think the only team that even makes an argument is the Nationals. I think the Braves improve a little bit, but we'll see. NL Central, Cardinals, Pirates, and Cubs. Pirates and Cardinals are always good.
It's tied every year.
But, I mean, the Cubs are just, what they have right now is just magical. So I'm going to take the Cubs out of the Central. NL West, I think this is going to be a good one, too. I don't like the Dodgers. I don't know why. I just don't like them. I will take the Giants, and I think the Dodgers are an NL wild card. I think maybe the Dodgers and the Pirates, 2 wild cards going into next year. And for my World Series, oh, boy. I'm going to take the Royals out of the AL. I think that's the safe pick, and I don't think anyone would call me stupid for doing that. So I'm going to take the Royals out of the AL. NL, I think the obvious pick is the Cubs, but I feel like everyone's doing that just, because it's trendy. I do like the Giants. I think that's a good pick. Oh, boy. This is tough. I think Royals-Mets could do it again. I'll go Royals-Giants, too. I mean, I just think that Giants are the sleeper in the NL. I mean, I feel like the Cubs are the easy pick. I feel like the Cardinals are an easy pick. I don't think the Mets repeat. But that's where I see it happening. All right. Moving on. So, yeah, spring training going on. Opening day isn't for over a month, so we'll touch more on baseball once we get closer to opening day. But kind of wanted to, I guess we'll end with this one. Bryn Forbes from the Michigan State men's basketball team had a Big Ten conference record 11 threes in a 97-66 win over Rutgers on Wednesday night. Michigan State, currently the second-ranked team in the country, likely to finish in the Big Ten regular season standings second. That's where they're likely to be. My question, does Tom Izzo, Denzel Valentine, and this whole Spartans team, do they march back to the tournament championship where they lost to Wisconsin last year? Do they get back to the championship and eventually make it back to the Final Four? And if not, if you don't see Michigan State being, legit, who do you consider the most dangerous team in the Big Ten right now?
Well, I think Michigan State is the most dangerous team in the Big Ten right now. I think that it's hard to argue with Tom Izzo and Denzel Valentine being a senior and what they did last year as a 7 seed. They have Travis Trice as well, who went and they beat Virginia in the second round and marched, and they beat Oklahoma, and they marched all the way to the Final Four, where they eventually just got obliterated by Duke, who was the eventual national champion. So unfortunately, that's where their season ended for them. But I think that out of the Big Ten, they have to be the number one pick to go back to the Final Four again. So I think they're pretty hard to argue with. But if you had to pick somebody, I would take the Purdue Boilermakers. I think that Indiana is easy to pick, and I think that Tom Crean is probably Coach of the Year in the Big Ten for what he's been doing after being on the hot seat in preseason. But he hasn't proved it in March yet. I just don't. He hasn't. He had a very good team a few years ago, and he never really proved that he can win down the stretch in March. Only made it to as far as the Sweet 16 as a possible national championship contender. So I think that he's hard to talk about. But I really like Purdue. I really like A.J. Hammonds, the 7-footer, and who's the Haas is the other one. They have 2 7-footers on that team. They just switch back and forth between the two. Very hard to argue with that when you have a 7-footer on the floor at all times for Purdue. And when they can knock down the shots and when they can knock down their shots, they are one of the most dangerous teams in the country, as Nebraska knows probably better than anybody. So I think that they are my most dangerous team out of the Big Ten if you have to pick somebody else besides Michigan State, Tommy.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. I find it hard to pick against Indiana right now. They've won 4 straight. They've beaten Purdue. They beat Iowa. They've got Maryland at home on Sunday at 3:30. I think that's going to be a really good game, but Maryland has played down to everybody this year. I mean, Indiana's just one of the they're not a great defense by any means. They're not great, but their offense is just, I don't know, they're just so electric. I mean, they shoot really well. They score a lot of points. 12th best scoring team in the country. I really like what Yogi Ferrell is doing, Thomas Bryant. I really like the depth on this team. Looking at more of their players, James Blackman, Troy Williams, Robert Johnson. I mean, all these guys average at least 8 points a game. They've got 4 guys averaging at least 11. This is a really deep team. This is an experienced team. This is a team that can shoot the ball really well. And
that's definitely true. But the story in college basketball this year, and especially for Indiana, in my opinion, is can they win it away from home? I mean, you mentioned all those wins. Those were all at Assembly Hall. So can Indiana go and win on the road or on a neutral court against a team that is pretty even with them? I mean, I feel like Purdue is pretty even with them. Maryland's pretty even with them. Iowa is pretty even with them. So how do they do on a neutral floor against a team that stacks up well with them? I mean, Assembly Hall is a hard place to play. They haven't lost there this year. So, I mean, it's... Yeah. I mean, and that's the story in college basketball this year. Can Michigan State win away from home? Can Maryland win away from home? You can make that argument about a lot of Big Ten teams, but I just think you're right. That makes it really hard to pick a best team in the Big Ten. So we'll just have to see down the stretch here of who can perform the best. And I think we'll get a very good taste of that in Indianapolis for who plays well on neutral courts.
See, you mentioned that. Indiana lost at Michigan State on Valentine's Day. They got thumped 88-69. That's before they welcomed Nebraska 3 days later, back on the 17th of February. But they beat Nebraska. That's been the start of a 4-game winning streak.
Right.
They did go into Iowa and win. I know Iowa's been reeling a little bit. Like their last 5 games, they've not played very well at all.
Yeah.
But they go into Iowa, they get it done, and they beat Purdue at home. I think Purdue's playing at a really high level.
Oh, yeah.
We got a taste of that on Tuesday here in Lincoln. So I like Indiana. I do. I just like what Tom Crean can do late in the year. To me, the tournament's always about who's hot late, and I know there's several Big Ten teams that have caught fire, but Indiana, I mean, they're the outright champ. They've won 4 straight. 2 of those wins come against ranked teams, and 2 of those wins come on the road. They did go and beat Illinois. They thumped Illinois in Champaign. That's not saying a lot. It's Illinois, but they have shown they can win away from home. They beat Michigan in Ann Arbor. They lost at Wisconsin in overtime. Hard place to win. They lost at Penn State, but so has everybody, it seems like. Other road wins, I mean, they beat Nebraska. They went on the road to beat Rutgers. Lost at Duke earlier this year. That was back in December. This is a different team. I think Indiana, definitely a Sweet 16 team, I think. I don't know if
I agree with that. Yeah, I agree with
but
that.
I don't know. I just think they could easily run the table in the Big Ten this year, no doubt about it. Zach will have more on some sleepers as for March Madness. Can't wait to get to that. I mean, it's our favorite time of year. The Big Ten basketball tournament starts next week, and then the week after we'll have the March Madness bracket fully underway. By the way, Jim Harbaugh making some more noise about his whole spring practice schedule down there in Florida. Mark D'Antonio and a few other coaches down there. I'll get to that later this hour. But I think that's probably going to do it for our opening headlines talking Big Ten basketball and baseball, because we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk Husker men's basketball for a little bit, and then we'll welcome David Stover from the Daily Nebraskan to talk about Nebraska's season as a whole to this point, and their loss to Rutgers last night, falling in Indianapolis 66-63. We'll go over some numbers. Natalie Romeo did shine, but wasn't quite enough. We'll go over that and what's in the future for Nebraska women's basketball. Looks like an NIT berth. But first, as I said, we're going to talk Husker hoops. Game with Northwestern Sunday. Tim Miles' future. Is he on the hot seat after this year? We'll discuss all that and more when we come back. This is Beyond the Arc.
This is your home for sports. You're listening to Beyond the Arc on KRNU2, streaming worldwide at krnu.unl.edu.
Welcome back to the show. My thanks to Zach for filling in for Reed and Kellen. Kellen's at the women's state basketball tournament going on in Lincoln this weekend at the Bob Devaney Sports Center, Pinnacle Bank Arena. Other high schools in the area hosting lots of games. Hope he's I think he's working for the NSAA today, so I hope he's having fun with that. Reed has academic commitments right now, so that is totally excused. We'll be talking with them in future shows. This is our first show in 3 weeks, and we had those two plus Zach 3 weeks ago, and you can check that out on our podcast, youtube.com, search Beyond the Arc. This show will be podcasted there after we're done here this morning. But first, I said we were going to talk men's and women's basketball. We're going to start with women's basketball because on the phone right now we have David Stover, sports writer for the Daily Nebraskan, and he has been covering Nebraska women's basketball all season long. And we haven't really done a segment on the women's team yet this year, so we thought we would bring one of the guys that knows this team better than anybody on the phone and talk with us this morning. David, how are you enjoying Indianapolis?
I'm loving it, Tom, despite the loss, but thanks for having me on your show.
Yeah, good to be back. David actually joined us 3 weeks ago to recap the Super Bowl. He's a frequent guest and friend of this show. So, David, I guess we'll just dive right in here. So last night, Nebraska, as the 7th seed, lost an absolute heartbreaker to 10-seed Rutgers by the final of 66-63. Nebraska's now lost 4 of their last 5. They're now 18-12 on the year, 9-10 in Big Ten play. I guess my first question, so you're there at the game. Guess your immediate reaction to this loss, a game where Nebraska was down, then they were up, and then really ineffective in that fourth quarter. Your thoughts overall in this game?
It just really shows how Nebraska's youth really hurt itself. It's just really unfortunate. Obviously, seniors Kendall Clark and Rachel Terrio had season-ending injuries, and actually Rachel Terrio didn't even travel with the team. So I actually went into the locker room after the game for interviews, and I actually saw Kendall Clark crying with her with Coach Yori because she was really affected by that. But unfortunately, I just think it came down to, in the last closing minutes, not having an upperclassman or only having one upperclassman on the floor really hurt Nebraska. Obviously, not having your starting point guard and your backup point guard in to run the sets really hurt down the stretch because over the last 3 minutes of the game, Nebraska had an opportunity to run an inbounds play, and it was on the second to last play where they tried to inbound it on a lob pass to Shepard, and it was an overthrown pass. And then it was just really Coach Connie Yori said at the end of the game that it just was due to lack of practice time with the same people. So unfortunately, I think it was just the youth and not having the experience down the stretch that hurt the Huskers. Yeah,
it was. I believe it was Jasmine Sincor who threw in that inbounds pass down there at the last second. But yeah, it ends up going out of bounds, and Rutgers up 3. What was it, 3 seconds to go or something like that? And Nebraska, that was basically it. I mean, that ran out the clock. Rutgers got the ball back. Rutgers shot the couple of free throws that put them up 3, and then Romeo tried the 3 from the corner at the last second. It wasn't a bad look, but just didn't go in. But hats off to Natalie Romeo, who did have a great night. 7 of 10 from 3, game high, 23 points, and the second team all Big Ten point guards certainly played well. So getting back to this game, David, so the Huskers are down 14 at the end of the first, 23-9. Rutgers went on a 13-0 run in the last 4 minutes of that quarter. But Nebraska, they did third quarter, they did what they had to do. They outscored the Scarlet Knights 24-11 in the second, down only a point at half. In your mind, so that first quarter, Nebraska really ineffective, especially in those last 5 minutes or so. What really turned the momentum around for Nebraska in that second quarter when they started kind of chipping away at this?
You know, Tom, that's a great question. Nebraska and Rutgers, it was a really high-paced game to begin with. Rutgers is very athletic and runs a lot in transition. Nebraska runs a little bit, but was trying to run more of its sets. Rutgers just started making shots, and Nebraska was missing shots. And I think what really turned the tide of the game was when Natalie Romeo had a steal to end the first half. I know once the half or first quarter, ended, I could definitely see that Coach Jory was really laying it into the players and trying to relax them a little bit. And now that Romeo just took over in the second quarter, to be honest with you, she had a steal, she had 11 points and made 3 threes, and that really and was facilitating the ball really well to other Nebraska players. And she may not be the most vocal on the court, but her game is very loud. She is constantly going for whatever she can get, meaning going for loose balls, always pressuring the on ball, whoever has the ball or anything like that. And she kind of turned the tide of that game, to be honest with you.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. Yeah, Natalie, when she started hitting shots, that was the big difference. She shot 8 of 16 from the floor. Allie Havers, too, a double-double, 16 points for her, 10 rebounds. Maddie Simon with 9. She had a big 3 late. Jess Shepard, pretty quiet game, 4 points, 1 of 9 from the floor. But, no doubt, Nebraska just, when they started hitting those threes, I was listening on the radio, and, I agree with you. When they started hitting those threes, that kind of really turned the tide for Nebraska.
Yeah.
David Stover, what, were you going to say something?
And I was just about to say, Nebraska actually got beaten every statistical category except for 3-point shots. I think Nebraska finished the game shooting somewhere around 65% or so from 3.
Yeah, 64%. Yep.
Yeah, so they were shooting really well because they actually got handled down in the paint. They got really outscored in the paint.
Yeah, Rutgers. Yeah, glad you mentioned that. The Scarlet Knights outscored the Huskers 34-10 in the paint. So Nebraska just didn't have a whole lot of success driving through the lane last night. David Stover, women's basketball writer for the Daily Nebraskan, joining us this morning on Beyond the Arc. So Nebraska up 9. We go to the fourth quarter now. Nebraska's up by as many as 9 early in the fourth quarter. And then the Scarlet Knights, they come back. They make a little bit of a comeback. Nebraska was held without a field goal for the last 4.5 minutes, and they only scored 5 points total in the last 7 minutes. Rutgers had 17 offensive rebounds. A lot of those came late, which led to some second-chance points. In your mind, what was it about those last few minutes where Nebraska, in the last 7 minutes, Nebraska only had 5 points? What was it in those last 7 minutes that really made Nebraska just ineffective as an offensive team?
Well, that's a good question, Tom. So Rutgers, what they did was they started making shots, and Nebraska started missing shots. And then once, basically Rutgers had called a timeout to reestablish their defensive possessions. So their coach went to a full-court press, and that really gave some fits to Nebraska. They started rushing it, turning the ball over, and making wild passes. Nebraska really struggled with the press, and it really slowed down the pace and the rhythm of their offensive possessions. And then Rutgers just went on a tear. They were getting the ball inside and just getting the loose rebounds. Rebounding is what really hurt Nebraska down the stretch. Obviously, Jess Shepard and Havers are pretty tall and they can get rebounds, but Rutgers was just extremely aggressive on the boards, and they were very athletic.
Yeah, it seems like Rutgers is a bit of a physical mismatch for Nebraska a little bit, especially down low, for such a young team. Again, David Stover from the Daily Nebraskan, live from Indianapolis, joining us on the phone this morning. So, Dave, just a couple more minutes of your time here. Looking back at the season as a whole, Nebraska's only won 3 of their last 10, and that skid, the last 10 games, that started with the loss at Rutgers. Since then, they've only won 3 games in these last 10 contests. The injuries of Rachel Terrio, Kendall Clark, huge blow to the backcourt. Nebraska also just lacked depth this year with a lot of youth on this team. We knew that, losing those 4 seniors last year with Emily, Katie, Brandy, Jeffrey, and that incredible class. At 18-12, though, would you say a women's NIT bid is in this team's reach?
Tom, I do think it is in reach. I think it would be a great opportunity for Nebraska to cultivate its young talent. Obviously, the more reps and more practices it gets out of the season would be great and very beneficial for the future. I think despite the rough 4 or 5 game skid for the Huskers, it was an opportunity for Nebraska to establish its versatility and fulfilling different roles, and also getting some PT to players that might have not otherwise gotten playing time this year,
Yeah.
So I think, the NIT would be a great opportunity for the Nebraska to also establish its leader going to next year. I think Nebraska kind of has established its leader in being Natalie Romeo. However, on the court, she's a little bit more of a calm demeanor. And when I went to the press conference yesterday, Coach Connie Yori said that she'd like her to be a little bit more vocal.
Mm-hmm.
This might be an opportunity for her to kind of set the standard for going into next year, because I know Nebraska wanted to be more physical going into next year and also be more vocal, because the talent is there for sure. It's just a matter of obviously getting leadership. It's kind of like Nebraska, like 3 years ago, their football team. They had all the talent, they just didn't have an outspoken leader, and they were trying to establish their identity. And I think that's kind of what Nebraska's trying to do now, establish their identity.
Sure. Yeah. Okay, David, one last question. I'm glad you mentioned all the young talent on this team. And so you look at this team, really the only players you are losing is Kendall Clark and Terry, and you've already played 3 straight games without them anyway. As unfortunate as this is, there's a lot of talent coming, and you lose Anya Kalenta, of course, who's been from Belarus, who's been on this team for a while, has contributed as of late. But you think about it, everybody else is coming back. Jess Shepard, Natalie Romeo, Jasmine Sincor, Allie Havers, among others. Emily Wood, Esther Ramacheri, a couple of players who have come off the bench, done good things. Maddie Simon, the freshman from Lincoln, has come on as of late. Could this be a pretty dangerous bunch going into next year?
Tom, I think so. Actually, Jessica Shepard won Big Ten Freshman of the Year,
Mm-hmm.
and also Natalie Romeo won. She was all Big Ten
second team All Big Ten.
Second team.
Yep.
Yeah, and so she was doing. They've got 2 solid players, or 2 established players in the Big Ten right there, and then Jasmine Sincor. I know Coach Yori is really high on her.
Mm-hmm.
Her ability to facilitate for her teammates and put them in positions to score is absolutely outstanding. And we haven't seen Maddie Simon has played well down the stretch. She really could do some damage in the league. I honestly think so. And I think what Nebraska struggled with was depth on the bench this year, and once we get some more recruits in there, plus the already established players that we have, I think we really are going to do a lot of damage.
Yeah, that seemed to be what haunted Nebraska in those late season losses with Purdue. I mean, all these teams like Rutgers and Purdue, and who else has Nebraska lost? Teams like Michigan or something. It just seems like these teams had so many weapons off the bench, and Nebraska just was very very shorthanded many times.
Right, and we struggled to score a lot of points off the bench. A bulk of the points would come from Romeo and Shepard, and if one of them had a bad game, that's when we generally lost. Also, we turned the ball over quite a bit down the stretch. Nebraska, when we turned the ball over more than 10 times, we never won a game this year. So that just comes with experience and taking care of the ball and developing rapport with your teammates. And obviously, they're all really close together, but playing together in the starting lineup and running your sets, that takes time and practice. So.
Yeah, sure. Nebraska committed 14 turnovers against Rutgers. The Scarlet Knights only committed 8, and Rutgers was able to score 17 points off of 14 Husker turnovers. And Nebraska, they're 0 for every time they've committed more than 10 turnovers, and Nebraska will find out their future next Monday for the NCAA Women's Basketball Selection Show. That's when the March Madness and Women's NIT bracket will be set. And, I'd say at 18-12 and 9 wins in the Big Ten, that should get Nebraska a fairly decent seat. But, their time in the Big Ten tournament is done. David, I appreciate you joining our show once again. Hope you enjoy the city. I've been to Indianapolis a few times. I like the city. I hope you enjoy it like I did, and I appreciate your time this morning on Beyond the Arc.
No problem, Tommy, and thank you for having me.
Thank you. David Stover from the Daily Nebraskan joining us this morning on Beyond the Arc. So Nebraska, as I said, 18-12, 9-10 in the Big Ten. And, Zach, I'm going to bring you on here. You had a chance to call a couple of Nebraska women's games this year on KRNU. I guess, what are your thoughts on this season overall now that it's almost over?
Disappointing finish. I mean, you can't argue with that. I mean, coming home for Nebraska to play in their last 3 games of the season at home, and pretty much the deal would be if you win all of them, an NCAA tournament bid is very likely, and you'll have a good seed in Indianapolis, and you'll probably get a win or 2 there. But they came home and they lost their first 2 games at home, and they had Purdue, Indiana, and Northwestern at home, and they come out for Purdue, and lose by 18, and then they lose by 11 to Indiana, and then they unfortunately get the win versus Northwestern by 9. So a disappointing finish for Nebraska, and we're talking about a team that before this 3-game homestand they went to Ohio State, but before that they beat number 17 Michigan State at home. So a lot of people were, including myself, were very confident that these 3 games at home were practically locks. I mean, you're talking about a team that is in the position where you're playing in front of your home crowd, you're playing in your own building, and all you have to do is just win at home, and you're going to probably go to the NCAA tournament. So a disappointing finish, no doubt about that for them. But like you guys were talking about, I mean, next year's exciting. But some things definitely need to be figured out this offseason. We saw what Nebraska is when they don't have Rachel Terrio, and it's a scary sight. I mean, we've seen what they are with her, and they're great. They're one of the better teams in the Big Ten, I believe, and they are definitely the favored team when she's on the floor, in my opinion. And when she's off the floor, like you guys were saying, it's Natalie Romeo and Jessica Shepard. They're in charge of the team, and if one of them's off, then one of them has to carry the whole load, and that's what Romeo had to do last night. And Nebraska only scored 63 points, and she hit 7 threes, and she had a great game. But unfortunately, Jessica Shepard only made 1 of her 9 field goal attempts. So it has to be figured out this offseason. That there has to be more depth. There have to be more people there that are willing to be aggressive and score. So. In my opinion, Tommy, it's a very disappointing end to a season where there was so much excitement, especially down the stretch, where they had the opportunity at the very end to get it, but they just lost that opportunity late.
Yeah, it looked like that 20. They were going for fifth straight 20-win season with those last 3 home games. It looked doable, right. But yeah, Purdue and Indiana are pretty good teams. But yeah, Nebraska just really struggled. Just not much off the bench to offer. I mean, you're looking at when you bring players like Ramacheri and Emily Wood off the bench here late in the year. They didn't get a lot of minutes early, and it showed. I mean, that's just, and as David said, that's just a case of getting players experience and getting your team more matured. So just a few last-minute stats here on this women's team, and then we'll take a break and jump into men's basketball. Nebraska had won previously at least 1 game in all 4 of their Big Ten tournament appearances since joining the conference. They have played in 11 of the 12. They played in the postseason in 11 of the last 12 years. The only year excluding that was 2011. So it looks like women's NIT is likely. Again, we'll know next Monday evening. Nebraska was last in the NIT in 2009, so they have been there a few times. Natalie Romeo is the first Husker in school history to hit 100 threes in a single season. She had 93 last night, needed 7. That's what she got. So congrats to Natalie on a season well done. And Jessica Shepard, as we said, just you can't say enough about this athlete. I mean, she's broken almost every freshman or is in every top 10 freshman list you can be in. She owns the freshman record in scoring with 565 points this year, the highest recruit in Nebraska women's basketball history, and it certainly showed. The freshman did all she could and then some this year to give her team a boost, and she is the Big Ten freshman player of the year. So congrats to Jess Shepard, and we'll continue to follow the women's team if and when they play in the NIT. It looks likely. We'll know next Monday. So once that's announced, we'll talk a little bit more about that in later days. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, Zach and I do our usual round table on Nebraska men's basketball. We covered the last home game on Tuesday, so we're going to talk about kind of just what happened. Not going to go over too much of the X's and O's from that game, just kind of see where this team stands going into a big Sunday game with Northwestern, what their Big Ten tournament looks like, and what, if any, postseason talk is still there for this Nebraska men's basketball team. Just kind of look at where they stand heading into their regular season finale this Sunday. So we'll break all of that down with our Nebraska men's basketball talk coming up next on Beyond the Arc.
Don't go anywhere. Beyond the Arc returns right after this break on KRNU2, live on the web at krnu.unl.edu.
From Anderson Hall on UNL campus in downtown Lincoln, Nebraska, this is Beyond the Arc on KRNU2, streaming live at krnu.unl.edu.
Our thanks once again to David Stover for joining the program. He and Seth Olson of the Daily Nebraskan, who Seth has been a guest on the show a couple of times. They are down there in Indianapolis covering the Big Ten women's basketball tournament. If you want to read more about that game last night, dailynebraskan.com. David and Seth just shared their work on that site this morning, so you can find their coverage of the Big Ten women's basketball tournament on their sports section. But as I said, busy weekend in college basketball and for Husker sports as a whole. So we're going to dive into our Nebraska men's basketball talk as they get ready for playing. This just makes me sad with the realization we're not going to go to the March Madness tournament.
No chance there.
Yeah. But I needed some music here. But yeah, so Nebraska 14-16 on the year, 6-11 in the Big Ten. They welcomed Purdue on senior night, which was Tuesday. Purdue's a good team, 15th in the country. A.J. Hammonds, Isaac Haas, Caleb Swanigan, they had their way with Nebraska, 81-62 loss. So, Zach, let's dive in here. Nebraska's now lost 4 in a row, lost 8 of their last 10. Their Big Ten tournament could start as soon as next Wednesday, and they have to play in Evanston. Which, by the way, Northwestern went to State College and beat Penn State. They're one of very few teams. I mean, you're talking Iowa and Indiana weren't able to go into State College and win. Northwestern does it. They're 19-11. They are just on the cusp of their first ever NCAA tournament bid. How does Nebraska just keep their chin up and just keep the morale up right now with this game Sunday and then the Big Ten tournament next week?
Well, Northwestern's a problem. Okay, and in my opinion, they have very little chance of winning up there. So they're going to be going into Indianapolis with a 5-game losing streak, and the question would be for you, how do you get your chin up after that? Well, think about your seniors. They're the most vocal leaders on this team, and they have been for some time now. And you're talking about Siobhan Shields and Benny Parker, and I think that those seniors are not going to let this team just fall down and die, and especially while they're on the team, because there is no postseason for this team if it's not the NCAA tournament. I think that they're if it's a CIT or CBI, they won't accept it. I don't think that they would.
Or the Vegas 16.
Well, yeah, I just don't think that they would at this point. I think that the NIT is out of the question, and so that makes it NCAA tournament or busts. And so
sure,
you put all your eggs in one basket here as far as putting your motivation and your time and effort towards one thing, and that'll put Nebraska playing on Wednesday, so that in that first opening round of the Big Ten tournament, so they have to play an extra game, but the motivation will be there, Tommy. I think that Siobhan Shields and Benny Parker are not going to let this team just roll over and die, and we're not going to see a similar performance to like we saw in that opening round game last year versus Penn State. So I think that Nebraska could win their opening game in Indianapolis, depending on who it is, but I don't know how much farther they can get besides that.
Yeah, we'll get to that in just a little bit. We'll look at the bracket and just kind of see where Nebraska stands at this point. And I'm glad you said that, because Nebraska, they have not laid down and died this year. They did that a lot in 14 and 15. But Nebraska has been pretty competent, and Purdue coming in. I mean, Purdue's just you said it earlier in the show that they're just playing at a really high level. I really like Purdue to do damage because they are so good. They are so big in the post. Two guys over 7 feet tall in their starting lineup, and they shoot really well. Like, they're top 5 in the Big Ten in offensive percentage, field goal percentage, three-point percentage. They are right there with some of the best teams in the Big Ten as far as shooting goes, and they play really well defensively. So that's a really dangerous team. I do have the stats from that game pulled up, and yeah, Vince Edwards 20 points, Caleb Swanigan 10, A.J. Hammond 16, all of these guys, just a really big physical mismatch for Nebraska. And for the second straight game, we saw Siobhan Shields really carry the weight, 32 points, 11 of 19 shooting. It was his night. I mean, there's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Made 8 out of 8 on free throws, was just playing out of his mind. But Andrew White, who's been battling shoulder pain, he only had 4 points. Ty Webster with 9. Glenn Watson 6. I thought Glenn Watson would maybe take more than 6 shots in that game, but it didn't happen. Purdue shoots 57% from the floor. I mean, Jake Hammond, Michael Jacobson was in foul trouble early. Jake Hammond just looked downright scared trying to post up against anyone that Purdue put underneath the basket, and can't really blame him. I mean, Purdue is just so good under the basket, and they just controlled it down low. And you saw it in rebounds. They owned the boards 35-29. Turnovers were not a problem for Nebraska, but Purdue also had 6 blocked shots to Nebraska's 1. So yeah, Purdue just kind of disciplined Nebraska down by the post on Tuesday. So now, Zach, we've talked about it. You said as far as postseason goes, you don't have a lot of options at 14 and 16. I thought, and many others thought, the NIT was a realistic expectation at the start of the year. Seems like a stretch at this point. I mean, it seems like Nebraska would basically have to beat Northwestern on the road Sunday and win at least 2 games in the Big Ten tournament. That being said, is it better or worse in your mind for Nebraska to play the play-in game in the Big Ten tournament?
It depends on how the chips fall. I mean, in my opinion, NCAA tournament's not happening. So, excuse me, NIT tournament's not happening. So the only thing you could possibly do is NCAA tournament, and so for that, it just depends on how the chips fall. I mean, if we were looking at it the other day, like if the tournament started today, and their route would be something like Rutgers in their play-in game, and then their second game would be Ohio State, and their third game would be Maryland. Mm-hmm. And so out of the top 4 teams, I would want to play Maryland the most. And we're talking about if they were to avoid the bye, if they were to avoid that first game, they could be playing Michigan State or Purdue in their first game. Yeah. So I would much rather play the extra game and avoid Purdue and Michigan State without a doubt. And so that's something that this team should probably be looking at. But obviously they're trying to win. But I think that depending on how the chips fall, depending on where Nebraska is seeded and where they are, if they fall to that 11 seed, they'll play the 6 seed and then the 3 seed and then the 2 seed to get to the Big Ten tournament championship. Yep. And so it's a much easier road than being on the same side as Indiana, in my opinion. I think that you want to avoid that side of the bracket. Indiana will cause problems for Nebraska. I think that out of the top 4 teams, like I just said, Maryland's the most beatable for Nebraska, especially on a neutral court. So even though none of them are very beatable, but of course you got to win 2 games to even face Maryland. They're on that double bye. So we'll have to see what happens, but it just depends on how the chips fall with where everyone is with their seeding, Tommy.
Yeah, a little bit more on just kind of the record and maybe where Coach Tim Miles stands. But yeah, even if Nebraska beats Northwestern Sunday, which would be a good win, a good way to end the seniors, end Benny Parker and Siobhan Shields' regular season, because Northwestern, they are 19-11. They've been fairly solid in Evanston, but even if Nebraska goes in Sunday and wins, they have to hope Penn State loses to Illinois at home this weekend to even get a 10 seed and play that play-in game, which it looks like Rutgers has locked up that 14 seed. So if Nebraska wins and Penn State wins, they're both Nebraska and the Nittany Lions will be both 7-11. They're in a 2-way tie for that 10th place spot. But if it's tied, Penn State, I think, gets the tiebreaker because they beat Nebraska last, and Penn State does have a slightly better overall record. So Nebraska has to hope for Penn State to lose. If Penn State loses, Nebraska wins. They're the 10th seed. They avoid the play-in game. But if they avoid the play-in game, you look at the bracket right now, the 10th seed would play the 7th seed. And that could be anyone from let me look here. That could be anyone from Michigan to Ohio State to Purdue to Michigan State to Iowa. Those are all teams Nebraska has lost to this year. So, I mean, if Nebraska wins and Penn State wins, there's no shame in my opinion, getting that 11 seed, even if Rutgers is, 0 for 16, 0 for 17 in the Big Ten, 0 for 17. You play them, it's another win. It's not a great win, but it's more time for the freshmen. It's another confidence builder, and maybe you could put up a good fight against an OSU or a Michigan or a Purdue or Wisconsin, Iowa, because several of those teams Nebraska did put up a fight against this year.
No, yeah, there's no question about that, and it's just like I said, it just depends on where these teams are at the end of the season, and it only takes one for Nebraska. We've seen crazier things happen in March, we really have. So I'm not saying Nebraska can go and do it, but it's just one win, even though if it is against a team that has 6 overall wins this season and none in 2016 yet. If you were to beat Rutgers, it could be that one win that gets you enough confidence to just play well enough against them in your next game. And then if you do that, if you win 2 games in Indianapolis, that's more games in Indianapolis than this team's ever won. So that's all the confidence in the world that they would need to maybe perhaps make a small little run there.
Sure, yeah. So a couple more questions here, and then we'll take a break, and then we'll have Michael Bruntz on the phone. We're going to talk Nebraska baseball. They're the next Husker sport on the docket. But one thing I wanted to ask you, Zach, so I think here's what I see playing out. I think a lot of people say this playing out. I think Nebraska probably takes it on the chin against Northwestern. They don't have any momentum going in. Nebraska hasn't won. They've dropped their last 4 straight on the road. I don't see that turning around Sunday, this weekend. Nebraska loses, that's 14-17. I think they beat Rutgers in the Big Ten tournament, no doubt. So that's 15-17. And let's say they play in Iowa, Wisconsin, and Michigan, a team that's been playing fairly well late in the year, a team that is better than them on paper. Let's say Nebraska loses to Northwestern, beats Rutgers, that's 15-17, maybe loses the next round. You're 15-18 to finish the year. That's what looks most likely, in my opinion.
Right.
But even if it's like 16-17 or something like that, or if it's still a losing record for the second straight year, is Tim Miles on the hot seat if Nebraska doesn't really put together a run in Indianapolis?
There's no question. I think he has to be.
Okay.
I mean, for the first time this season in the Purdue game, when he was introduced, I heard boos. I mean, I hadn't heard that all season, but he was booed by some fans, and I thought that he was one of the most well-liked people in Lincoln. And then you're hearing the fans they're upset with him, and they have every right to be. I mean, they've waited. Last year's season was much more disappointing than this year, but this year, when your expectations were low to begin with, I mean, they weren't necessarily very high. Like then you talk to the average Husker fan. I mean, even you, Tommy, saying NIT is a feasible goal, and NIT is not everyone's goal at the beginning of the year. You're looking for the NCAA tournament, and we were just.
I mean, that's the ultimate goal.
Yeah, I mean, you're just sitting here being like, oh, NIT would be okay, and they don't even get that. I mean, so I think that he absolutely needs to be on the hot seat. He'll have over a full year with his new recruiting class that is supposed to be the star recruiting class that came in this year, the 4 freshmen. They need to produce next year for him. Andrew White needs to be one of the best players in the Big Ten for Nebraska next year. They need to get better on the post, bring in a few more freshmen. Tim Miles has got to prove it next year, and he's got to prove it with avoiding the bye for the first thing in Indianapolis in the tournament, and at least NIT and a positive record to save his job. I think that there's nothing else you can do. I think that Nebraska has got to be more impatient with coaches here, especially with the history of losing. It can't be tolerated anymore. It has to be that there needs to be a winning mentality around here. And if people see a 14 or a team finishing 15 and 18 and be like, well, he's improving, which he is improving, but 15 and 18 is not good. You cannot be a 15 and 18 team and expect to do anything with your future, especially with what's happening right now. And the last year, and my last point on this is for next year. It's Andrew White's last year. What is this team without him? I mean, Andrew White is a stud and has a very good chance of being Big Ten or first team All Big Ten next year.
Yep.
He was a great pickup for Nebraska to get, and getting 2 years out of him is huge for this program. And he needs to be playing in March. I think he's one of the better players in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
And he needs to be playing in the
Top
sense of
5 scoring.
He needs to be playing in the NCAA tournament. We see the best players are always playing in that tournament. And he deserves to play in it. I mean, he never really got any minutes with KU when he was there, so he never really got to play in it then. But he needs to be the man for a team in the NCAA tournament. He deserves that. He's good enough to be the man. So I think that Tim Miles has got to do whatever is necessary to get Andrew White to the NCAA tournament at least once, where he can get some solid minutes and prove to the country what he can do and prove his draft stock. Who knows? Andrew White could have a future in the NBA. Who even knows that? Yeah,
that would be really cool to see if Andrew White, a guy has been able to contribute so much this year, will contribute a lot next year if he has a future. Real quick, Nebraska's opponent is Northwestern, 19-11 on the year, 7-10 in the Big Ten. Beat Nebraska back on December 30th, 81-72. They're 4-4 at home in conference play, but they've won their last 3 at home against Minnesota, Illinois, Rutgers. Seems like they're playing with a pretty fair amount of confidence right now. As I said, they beat Rutgers at home last Saturday, went on the road last night, beat Penn State on the road. Big win for them in my mind. This is a team, not a whole lot of depth, but senior Trey Demps right at the top, leading this team, 15.5 points a game. Brian McIntosh, only a sophomore, 14 points a game, averaging about 3.5 rebounds as well. And then Alex Ola, about 11 points and 5 rebounds a game. So, and then who could forget Derek Pardon, who gave Nebraska 28 points and 12 rebounds back in December. He averages 7 points and 4 rebounds a game. Derek Pardon's going to be, I think, still gives Nebraska some trouble, maybe not as much, but Northwestern does have a fair share of weapons. They rank 7th in the Big Ten in scoring offense, 5th in scoring defense. So they're not the most flashy team in the Big Ten, but this team has a lot of balance. They rank about middle of the pack in rebounding, middle of the pack in three-point shooting. So this is a very balanced Northwestern team, pretty consistent in what they do, but they're not flashy and they're not elite, and that's why they've lost to like all of those big teams. They've lost to Michigan, they've lost to Ohio State, they've lost to North Carolina very early in the year. They lost at Purdue, lost at Michigan lately, lost at Ohio State. They don't play well away from home, but lately they've been doing better at home. They beat Illinois, Penn State, Rutgers. They've won their last 3 at home, but they also played Michigan State at home, got thumped. Sparty went in there and really beat them hard. Penn State was able to win in Evanston in the middle of January. So we'll see if Nebraska can get it done. And that game is a 3 p.m. tip from Evanston this Sunday.
I believe it's at 1.
Yes, it is. It is 1 p.m. Sorry about that. 1 p.m. tip from Evanston, Nebraska, and Northwestern. It's the regular season finale. So it'll be something to watch. And by the way, we got to end this discussion and get Michael Bruntz on the phone. We'll talk Husker baseball. But I've heard both sides of the coin, both sides of the narrative. What do you think? True or false? Should Tim Miles be on the hot seat getting into next year, entering next season? What do you think? Tweet at us at Beyond_Arc. You can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/BTAKRNU2. Let us know on either one of those social media platforms. Is Miles, or should he not be, Tim Miles, be on the hot seat at the end of this year if Nebraska doesn't make a miracle run in the Big Ten tournament? So that's going to basically wrap up our Nebraska ball talk. Right now, we're going to go to a break, and when we come back, Michael Bruntz from Huskers Illustrated and 24/7 Sports, he will join us to talk about Nebraska's weekend with Long Beach State. Nebraska baseball are going to play the 20th ranked Long Beach State Dirtbags in California. They're in Cali for the second straight weekend, so we'll break down that 3-game series and where this Nebraska baseball team is before their first home series against Northern Colorado. That's coming up Tuesday. We break that down with Michael Bruntz coming up next right here on Beyond the Arc.
You're listening to Beyond the Arc on KRNU2, Lincoln, Nebraska.
Good show so far this morning. We're an hour through on a Friday morning. Tommy Rezach, Zach Penrice with you. David Stover joined us earlier. We're going to get back to a little bit of Nebraska basketball. Zach mentioned something about getting a center. We'll talk a little bit more on that. But Nebraska baseball is in action. Busy weekend for Husker sports and the baseball team back in California this weekend. And joining us on the phone to talk about that from Huskers Illustrated magazine and 24/7 Sports is Michael Bruntz, who covers Nebraska baseball all season long. Michael, how's it going this morning?
Not bad. How you guys doing?
We're doing well. Interesting win for Nebraska on Sunday, getting that win over Tulane 11-5. That was it looked like it was going to be a disappointing weekend with the loss to San Diego last Friday, the slugfest extra innings loss to Arizona. So the Tulane win, you finally saw the pitching staff kind of get it together. Matt Waldron came in and relieved, did 6 solid innings. So in your mind, that win over Tulane, how much did that kind of maybe turn things around for this team heading into this weekend?
Yeah, it was, coming off the loss on Friday night where Nebraska pretty much got dominated from the first pitch. I thought actually they competed pretty well on Saturday against Arizona and then Tulane. I mean, you mentioned Waldron kind of coming in, and Nebraska's really struggled on the mound with starting pitching so far this year. Zach Engelken didn't get him through 2 innings on Sunday, and Waldron came in and threw 6 innings of solid relief. So, from that standpoint, I think it was definitely a positive to get another look at a young arm who is going to get another chance this weekend to kind of show what he can do. I mean, he earned the start on Sunday, pitched well, and threw strikes, which is something that so far in the young season, this team, at least the starting pitching, has kind of struggled to do. But I think overall, that win on Sunday, the bats were pretty consistent. We'll see if it's a springboard, but it's going to be another tough weekend series against the Long Beach State team. That's kind of the standard team that you kind of expect from a California team, where they pitch well, they play defense well, and just kind of do enough at the plate to make life difficult for you. But I think Nebraska left that Tulane game feeling pretty good about salvaging at least one win on the weekend, and we'll see if it carries over when they head back out to California.
Sure, yeah. Jake Plotchik, a solid day for the Husker offense, going 3 of 4 from the plate. Scott Schreiber, 2 of 4. A couple of home runs, too, for Nebraska, as I remember. Was it Myers and then Schleppenbach who hit one?
Jake Myers had the inside the park home
That's
run,
right, yeah.
On Sunday, so it's a little rare thing there. But I mean, you've seen the pop at the plate, which is something that when you go back to last year, that was really kind of what hurt Nebraska. I mean, they pitched well enough, they played good defense last year, and they just didn't have guys coming through when they needed to. So you've seen guys like Jake Plotzek Jake Myers, Ben Miller. You just kind of go down the line that guys have kind of started the season off pretty hot at the plate, which is good to see, and something that, for Northern teams, you kind of don't know what you're going to get when you aren't able to get outside very much before the start of the season.
Yeah, and Taylor Fish, to me, has been a pretty solid surprise. He started in 4 games this year. He's in 11 at-bats, has produced 6 hits, a couple of doubles, too. So I think Taylor Fish, I was excited to see him. Anytime he filled in for Tanner Lubach, I felt like he did a solid job, and I figured he would be solid at the catcher spot. We'll see how good he is defensively going down the line, but I really like what Taylor Fish has been able to do. Yeah, the 3 players that hit the home run against Tulane was Jake Plotchik, Schreiber, and then Myers with the infield home run. And our guest here talking Husker baseball is Michael Bruntz of Huskers Illustrated and 24/7 Sports. Going back to pitching, though, freshman Matt Waldron got tapped to start Sunday. That was kind of interesting surprise. Several highly touted young pitchers on this Nebraska roster this year that we don't know much about at this point. Which others besides Waldron, are there any others that you think have a chance to kind of step on the scene and maybe compete for a starting job but in this non-conference?
Well, I think the pitching staff that Nebraska has this year, I mean, they've got 15 new guys overall on the roster, and you've seen young guys already kind of step up and compete. I mean, you mentioned Waldron, another guy that Nebraska really likes, maybe not in a starting role, but definitely kind of that late innings, 6th, 7th, 8th inning role is Chad Loonson, big freshman from Pennsylvania who's come in and thrown well in a couple of appearances. One guy that's been on campus but didn't really pitch a lot last year, Jake McSteen, a redshirt freshman. He's come in and thrown well in relief as well. I think he's a guy that they'll probably look at as a potential midweek starter from the left side. That's one thing that Nebraska really doesn't have a lot of is reliable left-handed pitching, and he's looked pretty good so far this year coming off of a torn labrum. And beyond that, I mean, it's just really kind of up to these guys, the young guys, to kind of come out and throw strikes. Sean Chandler is another name to keep an eye on. He throws in the low 90s, was drafted by the Milwaukee Brewers out of high school. Just a guy that, when he puts it together is going to have really good stuff, but, kind of like a lot of guys on the roster right now, just kind of struggling at times to throw strikes. But he's another guy I could see emerging as maybe a middle relief, maybe a spot starter on the weekdays, but definitely a lot of talent with Darren Erstad and this pitching staff to kind of deal with. It's just a matter of can they throw the ball over the plate and get out.
Yeah, certainly a lot of depth in the bullpen for the starting positions this year. Another guy I really liked so far, or at least a guy I think has potential, is Reese Edens. He's made a couple appearances this year in 7 innings pitched and has tossed 5 strikeouts. He's given up 8 hits and 3 runs, 1 of those earned. But yeah, Reese Edens, a sophomore out of Missouri, I think will be one to watch for as we go down the stretch as well. So another big story heading into the weekend, Michael, is Derek Burkhamper starting Saturday, making his first appearance this year after a 2-week suspension. Do you think, I don't know, it's kind of hard to tell, after he hasn't pitched since last year and being suspended for the first 2 weeks, do you think he's going to be extra motivated to make up for lost time going into this road series against a really good team like Long Beach State?
You would hope so.
Yeah.
He's a guy that, kind of found his way into Nebraska's rotation at the end of last season. Another guy on this roster that, was drafted by a major league team out of high school. A guy that, Derek so far in his career, he's got electric stuff. It's just kind of a matter of him being a little bit more consistent. In some ways, I would imagine he's probably going to be motivated to kind of make up for lost time. But, that's kind of where he's kind of gotten into trouble in the past is really kind of trying to do too much and not really kind of letting his defense work for him. So, getting him back at this point is probably a good thing for Nebraska. Colton Howell really struggled on Friday last weekend. He's going to get the ball again on Friday. Burkhamper kind of gives them another option. You got Waldron on Sunday. For Nebraska, again, they just struggled so much with the starting pitching. They just need a guy to go out and give them. They'd probably take 5 innings at this point, but if they can get 6 or 7 out of a guy, that would be an even bigger bonus. But I know Burkamper's been throwing in simulated games. It's probably going to be on a pitch count, probably 80 to 85, depending on how stressful those pitches are. But a guy that definitely has the stuff to be an effective starter. It's just a matter of him being a little bit more consistent.
Michael Bruntz of 24/7 Sports and Huskers Illustrated. Just a few more minutes here talking Husker baseball and their series coming up with Long Beach State, the Dirtbags in Long Beach, California. Second straight weekend they're playing on the West Coast. And yeah, you mentioned it, starting pitching has really been a struggle. Garrett King, who was a absolute money midweek starter for Nebraska, has made 2 starts this year and has only pitched 4 1/3 innings total. Colton Howell started a couple of times. In 2 starts, he's only pitched 5 1/3 innings total, so that's just a couple of them. And Zach Anglican's really struggled too. Couple starts for him. He's only lasted 3 innings, and he gave up, 4 hits, 7 runs, something like that in the last weekend in that Tony Gwynn Classic. So, yeah, starting pitching, really an area of concern for Nebraska. So we'll see how they adjust going into this weekend. So now Long Beach State, the opponent, Michael, they played 7 of their first 8 games at home. I think they played 16 of their first 20 in their home stadium. They've played a pretty tough schedule so far, but they've lost 3 games at home, 1 to USC, another to Holy Cross, and then they lost. I think they lost the series opener to Arizona State, and then they lost to USC just 3 days ago on the 1st of March. They losing that one 7-4. But this is a team that they've won some at home, they've lost some at home. So with that being said, this is, as you said, they're your typical South, kind of their warm state team. Which players in your mind need to step up for Nebraska to make a series win possible at this stadium and at this college where their baseball team has done some really good things?
Well, it really all kind of starts on the mound for Nebraska. I mean, you got to be able to get at least 5 innings out of your starter. Colton Howell will be interesting to watch tonight.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's looked great in the season opener. Came back and allowed 7 or 8 runs in a third of an inning in his next start. So he needs to bounce back, and that's really kind of the recipe against a team like Long Beach State. They're not going to really overwhelm you with their bats. It's the kind of park that you could probably land a plane in, I think is what Darren Erstad said. It's just one of those West Coast parks where the walls are pretty far back, and they're going to beat you with pitching and defense. So that's kind of what Nebraska's going to have to do. They're going to have to be a little bit better with runners in scoring position, which is something that they've struggled a little bit with in the first 2 weekends, even though they've scored runs. They've also left a number of opportunities on base as well. And really just kind of play fundamentally sound baseball. So it's going to be a good test. Like you said, Long Beach is pretty much hasn't had to leave home yet, and is playing pretty good baseball right now. So it'll be another good test for Nebraska. And this time of year is really key for teams in the conferences like the Big Ten to go on the road and win these series because they're going to be so big later in the year for RPI purposes and kind of starting to build that NCAA tournament resume as well.
Yeah, you mentioned it. They have really good pitching. Chris Mathewson starting on the mound for them tonight. Really one of several solid pitchers. Mathewson will be making his 3rd start tonight. He's already pitched 13 innings and tossed 18 strikeouts to only 2 walks, so a great strikeout to walk ratio there. Also, Darren McCoffin, I think that's how you pronounce it, another one of their starters, 14 1/3 innings pitched for him, 12 strikeouts to 3 walks, and then another one of their starters, Tanner Brown, with a 5.4 ERA. He's pitched 11 2/3 innings in a pair of starts for him, and he's tossed 11 strikeouts to 1 walk. So it looks like Nebraska, their offense is going to have their hands full as far as pitching goes, and Nebraska on offense, it seems like, will have to produce as much as they can to give their own pitching staff some leeway. But it looks like, as you said, Colton Howell, solid start, bad weekend at the Tony Gwynn Classic. If there's a chance for some of those guys to maybe bounce back, maybe it's against a team that isn't as well known for their offense and is more known for their pitching. And you look at Long Beach State's schedule in their wins, with the exception of the road win at UCLA in late February, a lot of their wins, they beat Holy Cross 2-1 or 7-1. They lose a game 3-2 or win one 3-1. It seems like they're more of a defensive-oriented team. So we'll see if this is the weekend for the Nebraska pitching staff to get back on track. We'll see if Derek Burkhamper has a good return. It's going to be fun. First pitch is at 8 Central, I believe, tonight. And then Saturday's game is at 4. And then Sunday's game starting at 1:30. It's going to be a fun weekend, and you can hear all of the coverage on the Husker Sports Network this weekend. Michael, we appreciate your time this morning, and we hope the Huskers able to at least get 2 of them. It should be a really fun series against a West Coast team, and we appreciate your time again here on Beyond the Arc.
Sounds good, guys. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Michael. Michael Bruntz at 24/7 Sports stopping by this morning to talk, well, at least joining us on the phone to talk Husker baseball this morning. Always good to hear from him. Good stuff from Michael on the Husker baseball team, covering basketball, football, all things Husker sports. He knows it really well, and we're always happy to get his insight whenever we can here on the show. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we have some fun facts, some come-on-man moments, and some things to watch for in college basketball this weekend. We're just basically going to wrap it up with some basketball talk. There was a couple more things I wanted to talk about for Nebraska. And then Zach has some NCAA March Madness sleepers. He made a list of those. I know he kind of went in depth with it. We've basically talked all the Husker sports we can, so we're going to end it with some come on, man, some fun facts, and then end it with some March Madness talk. It is that time of year, the tournament just around the corner, and it's a big weekend for top 25 basketball. We're going to talk about all of that and more when we come back for our final segment here on Beyond the Arc, KRNU2.
This is your home for sports. You're listening to Beyond the Arc on KRNU2, streaming worldwide at krnu.unl.edu.
Our thanks again to Michael Bruntz from Huskers Illustrated and 24/7 Sports for joining us to talk Husker baseball. Very excited they welcome in Northern Colorado this Tuesday and Wednesday for the first home series. It's supposed to be pretty warm this week. Zach, I despite the fact that football is done, this time of year is just so great. I think college baseball is great. MLB, spring training's going on.
Yep.
Opening day's about a month away, and March Madness. I just want to fill out a bracket. I'm going to be totally wrong on everything, but I just want to fill out a bracket and see how wrong I am and watch the Davidsons and the Lehighs of the world shock everybody. So it's going to be. I'm really glad to. It's a fun time to be doing sports talk, and we're glad we could be with you on this Friday morning. Tommy Rezach, Zach Penrice, last segment of the day. We're going to start it off with a segment we usually do on this show.
Time now for Fun Facts.
This is fun, right? We're having fun.
The part of the show where the Beyond the Arc crew shares with you 3 fun sports facts that you may not have ever known before.
Ooh, weird.
Now, here's Fun Facts.
Okay, Zach, I know you have a pretty good one about NCAA tournament odds. Speaking of NCAA tournament being wrong. But my fun fact, I wanted to share this, and then we'll get to on this day in sports history as well. So Snapchat is bringing bat selfie sticks to the Major League dugouts this year. Snapchat extending its partnership with Major League Baseball. This will bring people even closer to the playing field. The campaign will kick off with a special spring training event on March 11th. Snapchat says for that day, users will have unprecedented access to professional baseball players as they contribute to an MLB live story, and they'll be able to experience spring training games from unique camera angles. That's because for the first time, Major League players will be allowed to use smartphones in dugouts and bullpens, as well as a Snap Bat, which Snapchat describes as a bat selfie stick. Apparently will not be used at home plate, though. Under a multi-year deal announced today, this is on TheVerge.com, Snapchat will continue to provide coverage of opening day, the All-Star Game, and the World Series in addition to regular games. But MLB partnered with Snapchat a year ago in an effort to bring users closer to the experience of live games. The league has also expanded its own streaming service in recent years. Terms of the deal announced today were not disclosed, but you're going to have selfie bats. You're going to have Snap Bats, which Snapchat users, again, it's a bat selfie stick. It won't be used when they're swinging, but basically players in the dugouts holding bats, taking selfies with Snapchat. It seems like an interest how Major League Baseball has changed. You can now take a picture with Snapchat on a bat. I mean, how's that supposed to work?
Oh, very strange.
Yeah, so that is my fun fact today. And real quick, on this day in sports history, today is March 4th, 2016. On this day in 1913, the New York Yankees traveled to Bermuda for spring practice. They were the first team to leave the U.S. to train. Kind of reminds me of Jim Harbaugh going to the IMG Academy in Florida, which we will talk about in just a few minutes. A little more drama with that. In 1970, the New York Rangers set an NHL record of 126 games without being shut out. And on this day in 1993 in New York City, pretty New York-based history today, in 1993, the first ESPY Awards were held. And that is what happened on this day in sports history in 1993. Zach, I know you have a fun fact for us. Hit us.
Oh, okay. So,
Right? We're having fun.
All right.
So my fun fact would be that there has never been a documented perfect March Madness bracket ever. So statistically speaking, you have a one.
Say what?
You have a 1 in 9.2 quintillion chance of filling out a perfect bracket. The closest that anyone has ever gotten is a teenager from Illinois in 2010 got the entire first 2 rounds perfectly right. So all he had to do was the Sweet 16, Elite 8, Final Four, National Championship, and he was there. So
Dynamite!
So basically he was halfway there. So he was halfway there, but he obviously couldn't do it, and we know how hard obviously that it is to do so with. I mean, just last year before it was 3 p.m. in the afternoon on the first day, Iowa State and Baylor, both 3 seeds, had lost to 14 seeds out of nowhere, UAB and Georgia State. So you know how hard it is. And Warren Buffett actually last year for the first time offered $1 billion to anyone who fills out a perfect March Madness bracket. So I'm curious to see if the same offer stands for this year and for many years to come. But just keep in mind, people, that it is very unlikely that you will be the one to fill out a perfect bracket. But hey, who knows? Maybe you will be.
Just kick their butt. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm glad you said that because I remember reading this last year, and I wanted to bring it back. There are 16 crazy things more likely than a perfect March Madness bracket, believe it or not. Your odds of really weird things happening. All right, here we go. There's a one. All right, so you have a 1 in 9.2 quintillion chance of a perfect championship bracket. You have a 1 in 4.2 quintillion chance of sinking a hole-in-one, getting a 5-card royal flush, and winning $1 million in the lottery. 1.42 quintillion chance of all of that happening in one day. There's a 1 in 730,000 chance that the Yellowstone supervolcano erupts within the next year, each year. 1 in 730,000. There's a 1 in 785,000 chance of becoming a billionaire. You have a 1 in 10 million chance of becoming president of the U.S. You have a 1 in, I think it's like 70,000 chance of winning an Oscar. 1 in 23.4 million chance in winning a gold medal in the Olympics. And by the way, you have a 1 in 112 million chance of being crushed to death by a vending machine, and let's see what else, and a 1 in 39 trillion chance of making 8 half-court shots in a row. 1 in 39 trillion chance of making 8 half-court shots in a row. So you have there's a higher chance that the Yellowstone supervolcano goes off, which is really scary if you've ever read anything about that.
Oh, yeah.
You have a 1 in 39 trillion chance of making 8 half-court shots in a row. You have a greater chance of winning an Oscar, a Olympic gold medal. You have a better chance of becoming president of the United States, a greater chance of being struck by lightning than you do of filling out a perfect NCAA tournament bracket. But it's always fun. You've probably done this. You go head-to-head. Have you done those tournament challenges with your friends where you go like head-to-head and stuff?
Oh, yeah, no, it's the better way to do it because you're not going to get a perfect bracket. But, I mean, if you're playing in a group of, if you're playing in a group of your friends, it's more of like a who can have the best bracket, the least messed up bracket. You know? So that's more of the traditional and probably more fun way to go.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So, the March Madness tournament starting, let's see, we got conference tournaments next week and then the week after. So about a week and a half yet before we get that going. But always fun to talk about your odds of winning a tournament bracket. 1 in 9.2 quintillion. Those are your fun facts for today. Now we have this.
Time now for the part of the show you've all been waiting for. It's the
Come on, man!
Moment of the Week, where Tommy, Kellen, and Reed point out the most ridiculous thing that happened in sports over the last week. Seriously, it's so ridiculous, it'll make you say,
Come on, man!
Zach, I'll let you go ahead.
All right, so mine is it's a little more in depth, so bear with me here. This was a big story earlier in the week on ESPN and CNN.com. This is a Rhode Island Division III state basketball championship game that was decided by a buzzer beater after the losing team mistakenly celebrated the win too soon. So here's what happened. The Chariho Chargers and the Berryville Broncos were playing each other in the state championship game. Berryville hit a go-ahead 3 with just seconds remaining, and then the Chargers tossed the ball to half court, and then they called timeout, right? So there's about a second and a half to go, or maybe about 3-4 seconds to go in the game, and they have the ball at half court. They're down by 1. And so the Chargers toss the ball inbounds. It gets stolen, and the Berryville player tosses the ball in the air thinking that they won the state championship. The ball comes down. Carryho gets it, and then he's fouled, but the buzzer goes off simultaneously, and the refs have to review it. Meanwhile, while the refs are reviewing the play, Berryville is dogpiling. They think they're state champions. They are celebrating midcourt. The coaches are hugging each other. All the players are in a pile up at midcourt. The refs look at the clock. They decide we're going to put about a half a second back on the clock, so it gives Carryho a half a second to go and win the state title. They have the ball at midcourt for an inbounds pass. They throw it in, and it's a half-court alley-oop for the win off an inbounds pass, and they win the state title, and Berryville is crushed. So you're talking about wow. You're talking about a team that a minute prior was dogpiling because they had won state to tears and agony because the other team throws a half-court alley-oop inbounds for the win.
That's why you don't leave early. You don't leave
That
early.
is insane. You're going to have to send me the link to that video.
It is one of the better videos I have seen this entire year. An incredible comeback. And all you have to do is just dribble it out after you steal the inbounds pass and you win the game. And so he tosses the ball in the air. He didn't toss it high enough either. It was only like about 10, 15 feet in the air. He barely tossed it up. So if you hold on to that basketball, you are state champions, and it just a complete meltdown after celebrating a state title, Tommy.
Have you ever? No, I've never. Wow. What a finish.
Yeah, that is insane. So send me a link to that. So yeah, again, it's Cherryho and Berryville Broncos, and
Yes.
Cherryho beat the Broncos 60-59.
Yep.
Because the Broncos hit that go-ahead 3 with just a few seconds. I put them up by 1. The Chargers tossed the ball to half court, called timeout. After the timeout, looks like it was stolen by Berryville. They tossed it in the air. Ball came down, and then there was a foul, you said?
It seemed he got fouled, and pretty much what it seemed like in real time, simultaneously with the foul, the referee's whistle got interrupted by the buzzer, and I guess that's all Berryville heard, and they just dogpiled because they heard the buzzer, and the referees weren't really very inclined to call a foul, but then they huddled up. They decided there was time left, and Berryville lost the game, and
Holy cow.
Charho state champions.
Wow, I would play some more sound bites, but I'm just trying to take all that in. That is that's just crazy. So yeah, if you send me a link to that, I can post that on our Facebook page.
Oh yeah, no problem.
Go to facebook.com/BTAKRNU2. So I'll have that posted here in just a little bit, and we'll also have our podcast of this show posted. If you missed part of the show, if you want to re-listen to something, we have Michael Bruntz talking Husker baseball. We had David Stover from the Daily Nebraska talking women's basketball. Zach and I talked Husker men's basketball. And, one more Husker sport I wanted to mention. I mean, it might be of some interest to you guys. Husker football starts spring practice tomorrow.
That's football. Charles, that's football. What is he supposed to do?
So, I mentioned this at the top of the program. We're not going to spend a whole lot of time on it because it is just practice. I wish we had that soundbite. You remember that? We're talking about practice.
Exactly.
Right? I'm going to add that to the board maybe at some point so I can play that. But it is just spring practice. It starts tomorrow, but we're going to start seeing coverage about it. We're going to start seeing articles and footage and things like that.
Right.
What's one thing you're watching for the most out of spring practice this year?
Well, the easy answer is Patrick O'Brien. I mean, he's the new quarterback, and everyone wants him to probably be the starter over Tommy Armstrong. That's the general consensus, but he probably won't be. He's going to have a year of playing. And in my opinion, Nebraska, it might be in their best interest to redshirt him just to get four.
Oh, absolutely,
just to get 4 good years out of Patrick O'Brien. He's supposed to be the new stud quarterback. He's supposed to be Mike Riley's new big recruit. So. We'll see what he can do at Nebraska, but I think having a year of playing under Tommy, kind of trying to learn the ropes from him, learning the playbook better, getting to know the guys better, having more of Mike Riley's recruits come in and get used to the system would be very beneficial for this Nebraska team. But along with that, Tommy, I'm looking at the running back situation going on. I think that something that was even prevalent in the last season is there wasn't enough of Divine Ozigbo on this team.
Yeah.
I think he needs more carries. We saw he pretty much took over one game this season, and he took over the Illinois game, And then when nothing was going right, he was the guy that he scored Nebraska's touchdown. He was pretty much the one bright spot in the game, and he was just a freshman last year, so he'll be coming in as a sophomore. He'll have a year under his belt. Newby is going to be a senior this year, I believe, so it'll pretty much, I think, should be him and Newby running the backfield with Imani Cross gone. So I really think that running back situation is interesting, especially if they're splitting carries in the backfield, which is what I think is the best option for Nebraska.
And then you add Trey Bryant, the new recruit, who will be in on that. I don't think he's in town just yet, or is he here yet?
Because Patrick O'Brien came here early, so he's in school. I don't think that Brian is here.
So he'll be here in the fall. But, there's a lot of guys the running back race is going to be interesting. And obviously, the recruits that are here, I believe Lamar Jackson will be here, the defensive back. A lot of new recruits. I'd have to, again, read up on which ones are. I know Patrick O'Brien is enrolled early, but whatever freshmen are on the field, there's certainly going to be a lot of hype surrounding it. I know Matt Farniok is not here yet, so it'll be interesting to see those, but ones that I'm looking for are the Davis twins, Carlos and Khalil Davis at defensive line. Malik Collins and Vince Valentine are gone. You didn't really recruit any defensive tackles. And then Alex Davis, who's a defensive end, he's a redshirt freshman as well. And then also Freedom Akinmoladun. We'll see how his health is holding up, how he responds from his injury. I think that's going to be interesting to watch. Greg McMullen, he'll see if, he is still listed as the end. A lot of people thought he played better on the interior, so that'll be something to watch. So I'm going to be watching also Deshaun Neal, that redshirt freshman defensive end out of Omaha, who will be making some noise, I think. And it was pretty touted recruit last year, so I feel like he's going to be getting some more reps. Also, David Neville, I'm going to be watching for him. What is he now, a junior already, David Neville? Going into I think he's still technically a sophomore, but next year he will be he is listed as a junior, so my bad. So I had it right. He is a junior out of Canada, big guy, 6'9", 315. Everyone says he has the body to be an offensive lineman, but he hasn't really gotten the reps. And now with Alex Lewis gone, with some holes to fill there, you got Nick Gates, Dylan Utter coming back. We'll see if David Neville steps up as perhaps a starter on an offensive line that people are a little bit concerned about as far as depth goes, as far as experience goes. So we're not once we get closer to the spring game, we could spend an entire show maybe just breaking down certain positions and players and recruits and things like that as we get into spring football. But a big weekend coming up, as I said, in college basketball. Zach, a lot of big games coming up this weekend, and a lot of teams you have your eyes on as far as bubble teams, as far as bracket busters. Who are some teams you're watching for this weekend in college basketball?
Oh, there's quite a few. But I'd like to start on talking about this weekend, Tommy. Like you just said, there are some very big games this weekend. Quite a few of them, actually. Ohio State, Michigan State in the Big Ten, staying right there. That's a very big game to watch. That's an 11 a.m. tip on Saturday, so that'll start off a great day in hoops. Ohio State's looking to get that signature win that will get them into the big dance, and Michigan State's and Denzel Valentine's senior day is going to try and defend home court one last time. West Virginia at Baylor, that's a great game. That's at 1 on ESPN, so there's just a whole day of great basketball. Iowa State at KU, LSU at Kentucky. LSU needs a signature win, and winning at Kentucky could be huge for them. Looking down the list, Duke, North Carolina, that's the headliner. That's where College Game Day is tomorrow morning. Number 8, North Carolina at number 17, Duke. Just a few weeks ago, North Carolina was upset by Duke on their home court, so North Carolina will look to do the same to them. Virginia with Malcolm Brogdon's senior day, one of the best players in the country. Number 4, Virginia welcomes number 11, Louisville, in their last game of the season. Louisville cannot go to the ACC tournament, as we know. They cannot go to the Big Dance or any sort of postseason. So Louisville in their last game, maybe we'll see a little bit of some extra motivation in that game from them. Now, looking towards college basketball currently, Tommy, just a quick update, because there are some conference tournaments that have begun, just quite a few actually, and already some crazy things are happening, Tommy. It's March 4th, and we're already seeing crazy things happening in this March, and it's supposed to be a wild month of college basketball. So beginning with the Atlantic Sun tournament, the defending champ of that tournament, and the number 1 seed was the North Florida Ospreys, who they were a 16 seed in last year's tournament. They lost on their home floor, and they were the host of this tournament. They lost on their home floor of the semifinals of the conference tournament, 89-56 to Florida Gulf Coast. Who we know, Florida Gulf Coast, they're 19-13 right now. They're 1 win away from getting back into the NCAA tournament for their first time since that Sweet 16 run where they beat Georgetown and San Diego State to get to the Sweet 16 that year. So if Florida Gulf Coast is one of those hotter teams that they're kind of a low key team, they're kind of in a low one bid league. They would be a dangerous team for one of those big 2 beating 15, even a 1 beating a 6, or 16 beating a 1 for the first time. Who knows? More updates going around college basketball this weekend. The Patriot League tournament is happening, and the number 1 seed Bucknell lost their opening game to the number 9 seed Holy Cross, who was 11 and 19 going into that game. They lost in double overtime, 77-72. That game was at Bucknell as well. So it seems that Bucknell, Tommy, and North Florida have both the first 2 automatic bids for the NIT, as them winning their regular seasons in conference play. Along with that, more teams that you probably more sports talk you haven't really probably heard of. Louisiana Tech senior guard, just last night, Alex Hamilton hit a half-court shot to beat Marshall 97-94 at Marshall on their way to a 9-point comeback in the second half. Hamilton finished with 38 points for Louisiana Tech, and Louisiana Tech is in second place in their conference, leading up to their conference tournament next weekend. So look out for them and Alex Hamilton, who is one of the better scorers who is one of the better scorers in that conference and in the country that you've probably never heard of. Now, Tommy.
Yeah.
You wanted to get to these teams that I was thinking of. I kind of wanted to think with you first. Who are some teams that you may think would be teams to look out for?
I think Michigan. I don't know if Michigan's a team to look out for, but I think sticking just to the Big Ten, I think the big question is, will Michigan make it?
Right.
I mean, they were able to beat Iowa recently, but I think they've only gotten 3 wins over teams in the top 50 in RPI, so we'll see if they get in. I think also Gonzaga, we'll see if they're selected. I mean, the WCC tournament will be going on, so their only win,
it is said that the West Coast Conference is going to be a 1-bid league this year. It's probably either going to be St. Mary's or Gonzaga.
And St. Mary's was able to beat the Zags earlier this year. I think George Washington is one to watch out for.
Yep.
St. Joe's, I think, is interesting.
Yeah.
Cincinnati, they seem to be a bubble team on different times of the year. I mean, it seems like they're always kind of in and out of the discussion. Other ones I was thinking of, I mean, those are my main ones.
I'll start going down my list, and if you have any more, just go ahead and jump in.
Yeah, sure.
I'll start. I have 3 teams in the Big East that are going to want to be heard about. Seton Hall is my first
that's
one.
A good one.
They're as good as anybody in the country when they're on. Quality wins include Wichita State. They've beaten Providence twice, and they just beat Xavier last week. They'll have to beat Villanova and Xavier most likely in the Big East tournament in Madison Square Garden to win that tournament. But if they do that, they might be my most dangerous team in the NCAA tournament. So if you're coming off all these great wins, and if you can knock off both of those teams on your way to a conference tournament championship, that would be a terrific start to a possibly long run in March. Isaiah Whitehead is the best player you may have never heard of, and if you have heard of him, you know what he's capable of, especially getting his first chance to shine in the NCAA tournament, because they are considered nationally by many analysts a lock for the NCAA tournament. I think that they are a lock, so definitely looking forward to watch him in the NCAA tournament. A few teams in the Big East that scare me right now that are considered locks, Villanova and Providence are definitely some 2 teams to be worried about. Villanova, they haven't made it past the second weekend since 2009. Last year, they were a 1 seed. The year before that, they were a 2 seed. 2 years ago, they ran into the eventual national champions, Connecticut, so you can't really fault them for that. Led by Shabazz Napier. That was a very good team that they ran into, and they knocked them off. Last year, losing to the number 8 seed, NC State, in their second game. That was a very poor loss for them. So this is it. This is a huge opportunity for Ryan Arcidiacono, Josh Hart, Daniel Oshefu, who we know they can all play well in the regular season, but they've got to prove it. The last 2 years in the Big East tournament, they have floundered and lost. I think that they haven't made the conference championship after winning the regular season the last 2 years, ever since the Big East has become the new Big East. So, and last year they lost their opening game to a Seton Hall team who was the 9 seed in that tournament. So they definitely have a lot to prove, especially late this season. And Providence, stay away from them unless they do something crazy in the tournament in New York, which I don't think they can do. They've lost 7 of their last 10, and all of those wins. They actually just beat Creighton on Wednesday night, but Before that, their only wins in the last month or so were Georgetown twice and DePaul, who are both sub 500 teams.
Yeah.
So those are a few teams to look for in the Big East. Seton Hall I like Seton Hall, and I'm not so sure about Villanova or Providence at this point, Tommy. You wanted to jump in for something?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to go back. I want to correct something I said. I said Michigan beat Iowa lately. No, I meant to say they play Iowa here soon. They play them tomorrow at 7 o'clock. And I think if Michigan loses, honestly, I mean, they're 8th in the Big Ten as it stands right now. If they lose that, I mean, yeah, there's no shame in losing to Iowa because Iowa's, played as well as most anybody in the Big Ten this year. But if Michigan can't get that, if they get that quality win that gets them to 21 wins, that gets them one more win over a top 50 program. They do have a win over Purdue. They do have a win over Northwestern, though I don't think Northwestern is top 50. Mm-hmm. And who else did they beat earlier this year? I'm looking at it. I don't know. But they have they beat Maryland. Okay, so there you go. They beat Maryland, and they've beaten Purdue, and they beat Northwestern. I'd say those are 3 most impressive wins, and then they've beaten basically all the other bottom feeders of the Big Ten. So I think this is a big chance for Michigan to get a win to end the year, to get a win over a quality opponent. I think if they beat Iowa, they're probably in, but if they lose, they're still stuck in that 8 or 9 area of the Big Ten, right. And they'll be in a tough spot in the Big Ten tournament if that's the case. So now I think Michigan has what it takes to maybe make a run in the Big Ten tournament, but that game against Iowa, it's a chance to pull an upset, a chance to get that RPI up, to make that resume more important, more likable, I guess. And then I don't think this win helps their Big Ten seeding, but you feel like if they beat Iowa at home to end the regular season, that almost solidifies their spot in the tournament. Yeah, it definitely should. And I do like Michigan, but if they can get there, but I think they're a good enough team to make some noise once they're there. It depends on who their first game would be against, and how they perform in Indianapolis will tell a lot about how they'll do in the NCAA tournament. Now, sticking with the Big Ten, we talked about I do like Michigan State in that tournament. I think that Tom Izzo and Denzel Valentine are a combination that could be lethal in March. And we talked about Purdue, how impressed we are with them. But a team that I know that you disagree with me on this, but Indiana scares me. They just do, and especially in this time of year, and they scare me for the wrong reasons. Tom Crean, they haven't advanced past the Sweet 16. Tom Crean has never made it past the Sweet 16. And think about that team that he had that year. It was Cody Zeller, Victor Oladipo, a freshman Yogi Ferrell. They had a stacked team. They had Christian Watford was on that team. They had a stacked team that year. And the farthest that they got was the Sweet 16, and Syracuse beat them, who went on to the Final Four that year. So they do make me nervous, especially because this team is definitely not as good as that team. They were national championship contenders that year, and they were a number 1 overall seed. And a lot of people had them as their championship favorites. So they do make me nervous this time of year. But there's a first time for everything, as we know. Now, moving down to a mid-major team that I really, really like this time of year, and most people know their name, Wichita State, the Shockers. They're a very, very good team right now. Appropriately named. Yep. That they play in about an hour, I believe. They play in about an hour in their opening game of the Mo Valley tournament. They're playing a Loyola Chicago in their first game. And the reason I like them, Tommy, is it's the last chance for seniors Fred Van Vliet and Ron Baker to do something big in March. They've been here every year. When they were freshmen, they went to the Final Four. When they were sophomores, they went 32-0 in the regular season. When they were juniors, they made it to the Sweet 16, but they lost to Notre Dame last year. But they beat in-state rival KU last year. So they've done something big every year. So in their last chance, what are they going to do? What's the big thing they're going to do this year? So that they've surprised everybody every year, so let's just see how they do this year in March. Another team I think is interesting as High Point, the champion out of the Big South the Big South tournament. They're playing their championship against Longwood right now over on ESPN3. Oh, wow. Beating them 35-33 at the half over Longwood. So I think High Point, they're in there about the 15 or 16 seed. Mm-hmm. And Wichita State plays Loyola Chicago in the first round of the Missouri Valley Conference men's tournament. And then the Big South men's championship quarterfinals going on. I should beg your pardon. High Point's in the quarterfinal. And then the other quarterfinal in the Big South championship is UNC Asheville and Liberty. Don't think either of those teams are going to make it. And then those are about the only conference tournaments going on. I know the Big South is going on. The CAA men's tournament is going on with Elon and schools like that, but nothing super important out of that. I mean, there's a few of them get kicked off in the next 2 days or so. Yeah, 300 some odd schools. Yeah, a lot of conferences. And then the West Coast Conference quarterfinals start this weekend. Gonzaga will play Portland in the first round. And then Ohio State, Michigan State play. I think that's an important game for Ohio State's
definitely
tournament resume. That's going to be a really big one. Michigan State, second in the country, 25-5. I think they're it's going to be an interesting squad to watch. I think Michigan State's at least Sweet 16 material. And then what else? It looks like not that this matters toward the tournament, but Rutgers is hosting Minnesota. If there was ever a time Rutgers was going to get a Big Ten win this year, this is it. Hosting the second worst team in the Big Ten, I should say, the 13th team in the Big Ten standings in Minnesota. But getting back to it, LSU, Zach, 18-12. Obviously, they have the talent with Simmons. But yeah, Ben Simmons and that team, they've done some good things, but they haven't been able to put together 40 minutes a lot. They're 18-12. They play Kentucky this weekend. What do you think of the SEC as a whole, as a conference?
LSU's close, and they have been all year. I mean, they had Oklahoma on the ropes at home about a month and a half ago, and if they would have won that game, they probably would be in right now. And right now, I think that ESPN Bracketology has them in at next 4 out. So there's first 4 out and next 4 out. I think they're probably 7th or 8th as far as bubble teams that will be left out of the tournament. But Ben Simmons, he's regarded as one of the best players in the country. Let's see it. Let's see. I mean, he's put up the numbers. He averages a double-double practically. I think he actually might average a double-double. So the numbers speak for themselves when it comes to him. But when we talk about the best players in the country, the best freshmen in the country the last few years, their teams have been playing in March, and his needs to be playing there.
Yep.
I think that all the best players belong in the NCAA tournament. LSU right now, they don't belong in the NCAA tournament because it's teams, it's not players. So this game at Kentucky is huge for them. They need to win it, and then they need to perform in the SEC tournament. I think 2-3 more wins gets them there. I don't know if they can get that. LSU, like you said, their inconsistency scares me. But if there was ever a time of year to get it all together and come together as a team and play well, this is it. And so I think the SEC past Kentucky is pretty wide open. I don't know how many.
I was just going to say, I mean, you think this is a year that they could make a run with the talent they have. And the SEC outside of A&M Kentucky is not great.
And it's riddled with inconsistency, this SEC.
Yep,
so,
yep.
I mean.
Well, South Carolina, Vanderbilt are okay.
In my opinion, you stay away from SEC teams if they're not Kentucky. South Carolina just lost a home game last night to, I think, I can't remember who it was, but it was a sub-500 in conference foe.
I can check on that real quick.
In South Carolina, this is one of the teams who was one of the last undefeated teams in the country, and they just don't have it anymore. So
they lost to Georgia.
They lost to Georgia at home last night. So that's a crunch time of year where you're trying to avoid dropping down to that bubble area, and you lose at home to Georgia. You can't be doing that when you're South Carolina, especially after the year that you've had. But Tommy, moving away from the SEC. I want to talk about the Pac-12. It is probably the most crowded conference as far as talent goes in the entire country. You're talking about Oregon just clinched the conference regular season earlier this week, but also Arizona, Utah, Cal are all in that conference, and it probably is going to be a 7-bid league this year, and it's a very good conference overall. So my overall number one team in that conference is definitely Utah. I really do like Utah this year. They're a team that played Duke last year. I believe it was in the Sweet 16, played them pretty tough for about 35 minutes, and then Duke did their thing. They pulled away late. But they're all a year older now. They've beaten teams like Oregon State, Arizona, and Cal, who are pretty much all tournament teams. This season, they've won 6 straight. They're on a 6-game winning streak right now. They look to make it 7 versus Colorado at home this weekend in their season finale. Now, if they win the Pac-12 tournament in Vegas, they could be a legit Final Four threat. If they were to do that, they'd be on an 11-game winning streak going to the NCAA tournament, Tommy. And we all know that. We talk about it's the hot team this time of year, and they would definitely be the hot team right now if they were to do that. And so that is definitely a team to look out for in this tournament. But now moving away from the Pac-12. Tommy, there's a team that you and I kind of agree on in the ACC as far as a team that makes us nervous when it gets to this time of year.
Yeah.
Definitely the Virginia Cavaliers. Can they finally make a run? Can they get over the hump? Can they finally do something noteworthy this time of year? And for senior star Malcolm Brogdon, it's his last chance to do it. It's the year of the senior, and it's his last chance. And they've lost to Michigan State each of the last 2 years in the NCAA tournament. Michigan State has ended their season both times. I'd keep a very close eye on Virginia in the ACC tournament, especially, and then leading into the NCAA tournament, because, Tommy, there's a very good chance that Michigan State and Virginia could meet again in the NCAA tournament, because Virginia will most likely be a 1 with Michigan State as a 2, so a possible Elite Eight game would be very, very cool to see in a part 3, and it'll be either Denzel Valentine's or Malcolm Brogdon's last game in college basketball, so that would be a very, very cool game to see overall.
And then I see your last one. I just wanted to mention this, and we'll get this thing wrapped up and get off the air. Kentucky, you said they always shine in March. Coach Calipari, Jamal Murray, Tyler Ulis both averaged 16 points a game. I agree. Kentucky and Duke seem to be everyone's like NIT champions, Kentucky and Duke, or that's going to be the championship game. No. I mean, to me, the one thing that always gives teams an advantage in the March Madness tournament is coaching, and Coach Krzyzewski and Coach Calipari, obviously two of the best in the business. Maybe it is an off year for both Kentucky and Duke, but never sell them out of that of going deep in the tournament. I think they're Sweet 16. I'm not going to go ahead and say that number 17 Duke or number 16 Kentucky is going to make the Final Four. We have no idea, which is the beauty of this whole thing. But I wouldn't write them off either. By the way, Lehigh, speaking of spoilers, Lehigh is penciled in as a potential 16 seed. Them and Florida Gulf Coast in the Southern Regional. They would, if that's the case, if Lehigh makes it, they'd play Villanova. So one seed has never lost, but I'm just saying that was one other team I wanted to mention. Lehigh, when I thought of Duke, I was thinking that Lehigh win. I had to see if they were in Bracketology on FoxSports.com. They are listed as a potential 16 seed, so I think that's one. Lehigh and Florida Gulf Coast, two teams that have pulled major upsets. As if you're talking Cinderella stories, those are two to watch for. Games to watch for this weekend, one in the Pac-12, Oregon and USC. USC at 20 wins. Are they in? Are they out? That's an interesting one. They host Oregon. That could be an upset. That could be a marquee win. Man, I really like that game. I'll watch that one. Iowa State at Kansas. That's basically just a Big 12 tournament preview, basically, of what you got there at Allen Fieldhouse. With Iowa State and Kansas just trying to boost their seeding. Both teams ranked. Both teams are in. It would seem West Virginia, Baylor, same thing. Just a couple of ranked teams. Big 12 is really strong this year. Yeah. I think they're going to field up to 7 teams. Then Iowa at Michigan. That's a 7 o'clock game on Saturday. Louisville, Virginia in the ACC. That's at Virginia. That would be a great win for the Cavaliers to build some confidence going into their conference tournament. And then Sunday the 6th, Maryland and Indiana in the two Big Ten games. Maryland at Indiana, Wisconsin at Purdue. I like Indiana and I like Purdue in both of those games. Mm-hmm. Wisconsin needs to have a good tournament. They've proven to us they were able to steer the ship after Bo Ryan left, and with all of their talent from last year gone, they were able to steer the ship, get 20 wins, get on a streak, and build their way up in the Big Ten. They were at one point flirting with a first-round bye with a top 4 seed, but Purdue, they're lurking in the weeds there in 5th. If Purdue's able to win this weekend, if they who did I say they were playing?
Wisconsin.
If Purdue beats Wisconsin, oh my gosh. Maryland, Indiana. Oh man. So Indiana's the lock. If Wisconsin beats Purdue, they would be the 3. And then if Maryland, Wisconsin, Purdue, it's basically a 3-way tie for that last seed because like I said, Maryland and Wisconsin are tied for the 4, and then Purdue's right behind them in 5th. So if Purdue wins and one of those happen to lose, then you have to look to tiebreakers, and Purdue could have the first round, and Maryland has to do something, or Maryland has to play an extra game. It's just a lot on the line in those two games. Maryland and Indiana, Maryland trying to get in that first round bye, and then Wisconsin, Purdue, both Purdue trying to get in that 4th spot, and Wisconsin trying to defend their 4th spot in the Big Ten. So really exciting stuff. Lots of bracketology going on here, a lot of back and forth, a lot of guessing, a lot of we're probably going to do a specialty podcast, a specialty show once the bracket is released. Myself, Zach, will try to get Reed and Kellen involved, maybe a few other voices, maybe some college basketball experts. We'll see what we'll see on just what to expect, who's the best team to watch for, and make a bunch of guesses that we're probably wrong on. Just talk about March Madness because it's always so much fun. But that's going to do it for our show today. Zach gave you a lot of great teams, a lot of big games in college basketball to watch for. I just gave you several of them, but the 2 on Sunday, Maryland, Indiana, Wisconsin, Purdue. And then Saturday, Ohio State, Michigan State. You got West Virginia, Baylor, LSU, Kentucky, Iowa State, Kansas, Oregon, USC, North Carolina, Duke. One last time, it's in Durham this time. Duke hosting North Carolina in the ACC, and then Iowa at Michigan. Those are my big games to watch for this weekend. Then Colorado, Utah. Colorado's another one in the Pac-12. Are they in? Are they out? Colorado 21-9. We'll see. Big weekend of college basketball. Hope you enjoy it. For Zach Penrice, my thanks to Michael Bruntz and David Stover as well. For Zach, I thank him for coming on the program this morning. For Zach, I'm Tommy Rezach. Thanks for joining us. We will podcast this show. It'll be on our YouTube page. Go to youtube.com, search Beyond the Arc in the channels. Use the channel filter to search Beyond the Arc. You can see our podcast from in February, and you can listen to this one once it's posted. And you can always like us on Facebook, facebook.com/BTAKRNU2, and on Twitter @Beyond_Arc. So thank you again, Zach, for joining me. Good stuff as always, especially on all that college basketball. Those are some teams I wasn't really thinking about much. Thank you for your contributions as always.
Oh, yeah, no problem. Looking forward to the Field of 68 being released, Tommy.
Yeah, very, very soon. Within less than 2 weeks, we'll have that released, and we'll be talking much more on that here in future shows. For Zach Penrice, I'm Tommy Rezach. Thanks for joining us. This is Beyond the Arc, KRNU2. We'll see you next time. Have a great day.